So what are you watching? What factors are you watching in making these selections in order to see who the winners and losers are in Chinese property?
Hey, morning, Sherry. Chinese property right now, it's literally probably in the darkest moment before dawn, but there will be a dawn for some. So we are actually looking at the fundamental, going back to the fundamentals of these companies. And right now, what's the most important thing actually is the refinancing capability. Or without a refinancing, can those developers survive a prolonged shutdown of the offshore market? We all know that the Chinese developers all have pretty tight liquidity overall, but some are better than others, but they're pretty reliant on the offshore market for the normal financing of their cap structure. And now because of Evergrande, because of what happened to Evergrande, plus the tightening, the overall tightening stance of the government on the overall sector in terms of financing, in terms of sales and mortgages, we see that the market actually is very stressed, right? We've seen a considerable amount of Chinese property bonds are at distress levels. So that's that poses a big challenge for them.
How much is the PBOC helping with those large cash injections into the financial system?
Well, PBOC did pretty large injections recently, and that's actually not really surprising. You know, we need to understand that for China, for the Chinese government, it's always about stability, right? So even for the housing policies, it's about stabilize the housing price, stabilize the land price, and stabilize the expectations. So when they see there's a sign of potential systemic risk in the system, they would act. So it's actually a very good sign, and we see that Beijing is itching towards having more support to the broader economy. But now the question is, will they relax the property sector? For now, we don't see that happening.
How likely is it, do you think, that the government's going to find some sort of scapegoat for this entire crisis, somebody who can act as a chilling warning for the future?
Evergrande is kind of a warning, isn't it? Evergrande, to a certain extent, it was extremely expansionary and aggressive in terms of its business operations. But at the same time, it's very typical model of Chinese developer business model. So just by putting on debt and in off balance sheet and through trust and have a very complexity cap structure. So I would just think that, but how they deal with the Evergrande restructuring, because now Evergrande has officially appointed FAs to deal with the restructuring, how they deal with the restructuring, whether the restructuring will be smooth and orderly, will be a crucial factor for the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, restructuring, containing the initial fallout and the risk of contagion is one thing, but in terms of contagion risk, is it possible to contain all of it? We're hearing today that Evergrande's going to have trouble paying the staff of its EV unit. There's going to be a lot of other creditors and very small suppliers having trouble as well. Is it possible to calculate just how far the rot has spread?
You're absolutely right. It's a very complex situation here for Evergrande, just given its sheer size and the complexity on the cap structure. What the government cares the most, again, stability. If you look at the areas where could most possibly trigger social instability, is the SMEs, is the mom and pops, is the home buyers. I would be very surprised if the government doesn't do anything and to make sure that those people are getting settled and satisfied. Well, for the rest, just leave it to the market.
Jenny, not a great week to be launching the Southbound Bond Connect. What can we expect for this facility? How significant is this?
It is still a milestone for China to further opening up its capital market. And if you look at it, they actually put a quota initially. There is a 20 billion daily quota and a 500 billion annual quota. Compared with northbound, there was no quota for the northbound when they first opened it. With this tells us that the authorities remain more cautious and prudent in terms of opening up the other way around. So they are always more prudent and cautious on the outflows. They still want to control the outflows right? But it's still, I mean, right now it only opens up to a relatively small market. But you know that the Chinese way of doing things is to always go a little bit and test the water a little bit and see how it goes. If it's smooth and orderly, and if there are a lot of interest, and then they will gradually open it up to further a broader market. And we're actually still pretty constructive on this area.